Good evening, all. Distinguished speaker for the day, my friends, colleagues, and viewers. We are honored and pleased that amongst us we have many CEOs, CFOs, company secretaries, lawyers, startup promoters taking part in this webinar globally. And I extend my heartfelt salutations and greeting to them. It is an honor and privilege for me to welcome you all this Saturday evening. Today's webinar is on the subject matter Disruptive Times, Quite Astute and Inspiring Leadership. I take this opportunity in formally welcoming Dr. Adil Malia, CEO and partner, the firm, a legend and an icon amongst us. We are very fortunate to have
Thank you.
Dr. Malia with us.
Thank you very much, Rishikesh.
Dr. Adil has been a thought leader in the different dimensions of corporate transformation, people and leadership space for nearly 4 decades now. Adil has worked with diverse conglomerates and companies like Godrej, GE, Al-Futtaim, Coca-Cola, and Essar in India and overseas. With several degrees in commerce, law, and management, and over 4 decades of corporate experience in board level positions. Adil is a passionate and engaging keynote speaker, facilitator, and a trainer on several learning themes. He leads the leadership, people management, and learning practices as the CEO and the managing partner at the firm. Adil has diverse interests. He is a doodler on social media. He plays the Mohan Veena and is an avid reader. Very good evening, Mr. Malia, and a very warm welcome to you. And I feel the audience and participants are very fortunate to have amongst them a person of your stature who is not only knowledgeable but has tons of wisdom with him. So now it's all yours, sir. You may just start by sharing something about the theme, your experience, and later on we'll start with the Q&A.
Sure. So thank you very much, Rishikesh. It is indeed a matter of great privilege for me to be invited by you. Let me begin by saying, may you live in interesting times. Why do I say that? Because it has a unique context. Now, this phraseology, may you live in interesting times, is originally a Chinese curse. Now, it's a curse, first of all, it's not a greeting, and it's Chinese. And in this peculiar times that we are experiencing and facing, with the world being totally antagonistic toward anything that is Chinese, for me to begin with a Chinese curse is a very funny thing. But I will tell you why it's very also interesting, because most people think that when they are talking about interesting times, they are thinking in terms of positive experiences. So the story goes that actually the Chinese parents, like any other parents in the world, were constantly in a state of conflict with their children. The children is interesting, and the parents always wanted to have steady situations. They wanted to have continuity and all of that, which the children found very boring. So with an intention to tell the children that you will get all the pain and all the troubles when you will get into all of this, they would literally in anger tell their children that may you living in interesting times. And that is how the phraseology has come in. Unfortunately, we seem to have been on the other end of this Chinese curse, with them pressing on us, may you live in interesting times. And the whole world is now facing those interesting times. And I hope these interesting times of such nature pass away and we really get into better and beautiful times ahead. Now, as you know, we are all living in a black swan era. When we say black swan, most people don't understand black swan era. But let me tell you that the world believes that the swans are always white. Has anyone thought of swans which are not white? Until one time in America, they found swans which were black. And this destroyed the basic science and the belief about ecology that swans can only be white. So thereafter, a novel got written and a concept got developed in the world, which is called the Black Swan event, which means that that event, when the entire science upon the happening of an event, the entire science around it got totally changed. And After that event happened, there was a huge amount of surprise. It destroys the prevailing science. And thereafter, when the science is destroyed, the people who hear about this subsequently say that actually we thought and we knew that this event is going to happen, though we did not spell it out, but it is very obvious that it happened. But until that event was actually happening, they really were not able to predict it. So three things happening. Number one, that event happens, a black swan event happens. There is a certain element of surprise that exists. It destroys the prevailing science, and people subsequently acknowledge it as, yes, we could have seen it, but it didn't happen. Let me give you some examples. The financial crash of the market, black swan event. The bank crash, black swan event. The dot-com bust that happened and what we experienced, a black swan event. The subprime event which happened, again a black swan event. Dot-com bust, black swan event. Disappearance of USSR, black swan event. Because no one actually saw it coming. When that event happened, there was a huge amount of surprise. And when that came in, it changed the entire science around which the old science prevailed and a new set of thinking came in. And now we are also experiencing the same thing happening with COVID, where even a few days ago, we were not even aware that such an event could happen, which would paralyze the globe to the extent that now we experience that global paralysis, and therefore it is yet another black swan event. Until now, there used to be two such black swan events happening in a long time in blends, but we are living in an era of black swan happenings. And therefore, we have to ready ourselves to be facing more and more turbulent times, which will be created by the black swan events, because when the turbulent times happen, they shift the paradigm. And when the paradigm shifts, everything becomes zero. All the existing systems, all the existing practices, all the existing processes that we have been following, they all come to an end, and as a consequence of which, new systems come in, and therefore, shifting of a paradigm causes a lot of disruption, and we now live to be staying in an age where we need to develop our own comfort with a series of such black swan events which will keep coming. It is now COVID, tomorrow it could be something else, but these black swan events will keep coming around. Now, let us ask this question, why have these events been happening when actually the nation was progressing and the countries in the world were progressing? I just want to do a little checkout. Am I audible? Is it clear to everybody? Am I visible also?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please carry on.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So why has this event happened? So number one is that there is a systematic deterioration in ethical values while strengthening of economic value. We have been mindlessly focusing on developing economic value, but we were totally mindless when it came to realizing the deterioration in the ethical values that we needed to follow. The second is that this entire concept of globalization, we actually miscalculated the impact of globalization because we were only economically focused, and we did not realize that actually globalization also means that there are certain negative impacts which we failed to calculate and account for when we were planning for the global world that we were living in. We were also ecologically blind, whilst digitally we were becoming very, very aware. So we were destroying our trees, we were destroying our planet, we were not bothered about it. A few people started making noise about our planet and environment, but actually we were digitally becoming more and more conscious, but ecologically we were developing our blindness. So could we not have imagined this? Could all the leaders, could all the wisdom, could all the knowledge have not identified it? And the answer is that there is a general tendency in most leaders in the corporate world and general leaders in the world, that there is a concept of myopic blindness caused by the immediate Pareto monster. So the human being has a tendency that the biggest problem on hand, the problem which is causing 80% of the pain or 80% of the loss or 80% of the challenge, gets disproportionate attention from our end. disproportionate resources get invested in trying to solve that problem, disproportionate attention is given to the problem, as a consequence of which other problems which currently may be very small but which may have the potential to be paradigm redefining, they don't tend to get the attention at all, and therefore we are focused only towards a myopic blindness which is caused by the immediacy of the Pareto monster. And the fact remains that we have lived in a world which is connected but which has not been very trusting on each other. We have lived in a world that is connected, but we have not lived in a world or created a world of collaboration. And these are some of the reasons why collectively, even if you see today, the world is depending on China from a global supply chain point of view, but the world is not willing to trust or collaborate with China any further. And these are all realities which have come into existence because we have been mindlessly focusing on things, not in a holistic way, but in a very limited economic way. For a minute, let's take a halt and ask this question as to what are the roles of leaders, because turbulent times, and we are talking about what kind of leadership is required, but we should first of all understand what is the expectation from leadership at any given point of time and how that changes when such kind of turbulent events happen. So actually, if you will go through or scan through any literature, any studies, any experienced people at the senior most levels, when we coach leaders and we talk to them as to what the roles of leadership is about, leadership anywhere in the world has predominant 6 roles that they have to perform. Number 1, aggregate, direct, and communicate around the committed purpose. Now, the organization is built around a purpose, so they have to aggregate, direct, and communicate a commitment around that purpose, and that is the pure role of leader. The second is to connect people to that. So it is to tell people that you are not disconnected pair of hands, but you are a connected set of very critical contributors who will perform for the fulfillment of the purpose, and that strategic connection is what the role of leadership is about. The third role is to create a motivated engagement in the organization so that the people who are working are not feeling that, oh, we are only being paid and we are only required because of something, and our role ends when we get paid. So that is not only a commercial transaction, but there is a meaningful, motivated engagement, and that to ensure is the job of a leader. The fourth job of a leader is to ensure that if there are any problems that emerge, at that point of time, that problem is systematically handled and the entire enterprise is not halted because they are not able to solve the problem, but he helps in facilitating the solving of the problem. The fifth is he has to ensure that there is efficiency in the organization, which means that whatever are the available resources, they are utilized to their fullest extent, and how they are able to be effectively driven to give something more, the discretionary efforts that people can give much more when an inspired leader makes them achieve things much beyond the capability of the available resources. And that is the role of leadership. And the sixth, that a network of relationships outside and inside with the government, with the neighborhood, with everyone who's connected with the business, a strong network of relationship is built. The purpose of defining this is to ensure that how in turbulent times these roles change, and therefore if we understand this role, we will be able to talk about how in the turbulent times the relationships or these roles keep changing. But the full purpose of all of these 6 roles that we were talking about is to create value and create a certain element of enterprise flourish for the stakeholders, and in the process create happiness for not only the employees and the shareholders, but happiness for all the stakeholders, because ultimately the end purpose of all human endeavor is to create happiness. Value is one before that. The ultimate purpose is to create happiness. Now, when adversity strikes, now this is the real situation, steady state situation going on. Leadership, I'm making a presumption, leadership is performing the 6 roles that we talk about. This is the time when adversity has struck. Now, every organization has 5 sacraments, and which you need to be aware. So number 1 is vision. Number 2, it's mission. Number 3 is strategy. Number 4, it's values. And number 5, it's various plans. So these 5 sacraments at all points of time have got to be aligned. And naturally, because the company is prospering, company is working in a steady state, creating value, my presumption is that all of these 5 sacraments of the enterprise are in a state of alignment. Now, when adversity strikes, number 1, you need to understand it does not come with any announcements. It does not come with a placard. It does not come with a 30-day contractual notice that at the end of the 30th day, I'm going to strike you and I'm Mr. Adversity. I'm going to strike your existence. Doesn't come with that kind of a situation. Now, organizations, therefore, have a differentiated impact of the same adversity. As you will notice in each of your companies, the adversity is the same, but the striking of the adversity is different. Now, on what does that depend? So when adversity strikes, a certain level of flexibility, a certain level of plasticity, if that is prevailing, of that organization to be able to cope with it. Now, no one really knows the adversity. No one knows what event is going to hit. So actually the event hits everyone equally, but the organization, which has these 4 things, agility, flexibility, plasticity, and maturity, will be able to cope with very positive responses in disruptive times. So when adversity happens, the alignment of the 5 factors which have got to be aligned, that alignment gets disturbed. And companies which have got these 4 elements within themselves are able to find a realignment very fast compared to companies which are very rigid. They are not at all plastic. They don't know how to shift with time. They are not matured enough. They really are not flexible, but they are rather very, very constricted in the ways they have been working. They will find it very, very difficult to cope with the rigidities they have and then to cope with the changing requirement of what the adversity in the new paradigm will expect them to do. Now, let's come to the breakdown and what is happening just now and see how leadership works out, all right? Now, from a steady state that we were talking about, where we were prospering, adversity is striking, immediately after adversity, and you can read any amount of experiences of people who have handled adversity. I have handled and helped companies cope with adversity many, many times. The company passes through very, very clear 4 distinct stages. And you got to be mindful because there are different things which are happening in each stage before the company goes into a stage of transformation. But people don't even know that. Everyone who is in an organizational leadership role believes that, you know, he has magical powers to know how to do and what to do. And then ultimately they end up creating a mess. I only wish that these leaders would have had some time to work on these skills of how organizations need to manage their adversities very well. So the first zone, I'll give you the names of the 4 zones, and then I'll explain to you what they are. The first is called the twilight zone of obscurity. The second is called the zone of sustenance. The third is called the zone of designing and recalibration. And the fourth is called the zone of commitment, dedication, and reconstruction. And these are the 4 zones. Now, expectation from the people, situation prevailing in each of these, the role that the leader is supposed to be playing is different in each of these roles. So it is not the same set of leadership which he is supposed to play at each and every stage that we are passing by. So let me explain the stage and then tell you as to what is generally the expectation of leadership at each of these zones. And then we see what we find when we talk to various people, what do we find the kind of leadership they are experiencing in organizations. So the first, as I told you, is called the twilight zone. Twilight zone is immediately post-impact, the immediately following zone, the first zone. It is the period of darkness. We all know in history there were dark ages. So when the entire big Roman Empire collapsed for 300 years, the collapse of the Roman Empire was followed by what is called the Dark Ages. And then came the period of Renaissance that we know in history. But we don't need to go for 300 years through all of that. That is not the suggestion. But to say that when adversity strikes, the first phase of the twilight zone is very, very similar to the dark ages. There is a sense of shock, there is ambiguity, there is fear, there is collapse, there is a sense of doomsday happening. And of course, there is this Armageddon kind of a feeling immediately happening, as if the world is collapsing, everything is coming to an end, all the existing behaviors are not happening, everything that you used to do is not giving you the results that you were expecting out of that. Generally, at this point of time, people are very, very confused. It is like finding themselves in a dark room. They don't know who all are there with them in the dark room. Suddenly the room has become dark, and this darkness is continuing beyond the reasonable amount of a short few hours of darkness, and they really don't know. What do people expect at this point of time? At this point of time, the expectation is that they want someone to fall back upon, they want some sensitivity, they want to get some direction, they want to start depending on someone, they want some reassurance from somebody, they want someone to come and say, they want the leader to come and say at this point of time, don't worry, main hoon na. But what are the experiences? Most of the leaders themselves, having not really experienced adversity management or getting trained in how to handle and cope with adversities, they suddenly are themselves lost. And instead of providing main hoon na leadership, they end up providing experience of leadership to their people, where the followers end up saying, leadership to hum dhundte reh jayenge. We are searching for leadership. Instead of main hoon na, we have got dhundte reh jaoge kind of leadership. And that is the prevailing twilight zone. Indication is, of course, what the leader should be doing. You can imagine the situation is that what leaders should be doing at that point of time. We do not really have that much of long time. If I was running a one-day session for you guys, I would have helped you develop your capability for that. But this is only to give you a certain element of flavoring to it. The second is the zone of sustainability, which is phase 2, which comes immediately after the dark zone. I once again just want to do a check whether my voice and my visual is clear. Rishikesh, can you just give me a high five?
Yes, perfect, perfect.
All right. So the second is the zone of sustainability. Now, after the dark ages are over, and which is what like we are experiencing, we are saying, how do we restart ourselves? Do we need to do unlock phase 1, unlock phase 2? So this is called the zone of sustainability, where we are trying to reintroduce. So there is a need for structured communication. Now, I may tell you that there is need for structured communication at this stage, but let me tell you, and this is like a caveat, that at each and every of these 4 stages, the twilight zone, the zone of sustainability, the zone of recalibration, and the zone of commitment, communication plays one of the most important things. You could err on the side of communication, which is more open and better, than to under communicate, and that is one of the most important things. So as you are reintroducing, what is the requirement? The requirement is rebuilding the confidence. People are coming into the organization, they are feeling absolutely shaken up. One of my friends incidentally happened to tell me, Adil, actually, you know what my worry was? 70 days ago, what was I doing in the company? Now I don't remember. I don't know. I think I remember my job. So I don't know what I will do on day 1 when I go to my job. So that kind of confidence is getting shaken up, because there was in the dark ages a certain stage of what we call in psychology, a stage of neurosis, anxiety, fear, hypochondria. These are the behaviors that you'll see. And the worst is that we have noticed that in the dark zones, there is a huge amount of matrimonial disruption that has happened. The total number of complaints registered for domestic violence during this period has shot up by a clear 12%, because people, out of fear, anxiety, and other neuroses, staying along in small houses, trying to work together and also contribute to domesticity. Whilst that may have happened on the one side, the offside is a domestic violence, which is a natural outcome of frustrations. So in this zone of sustainability, which is the second zone, we are talking about rebuilding confidence. You can imagine that when a person is a patient of ICU, the next day from ICU, you cannot tell him tomorrow morning, go to the gymnasium and start exercising your knee. So there is a certain phasing out that is required. So there is a period of re-bringing him into the situation, slowing down, tomorrow morning onwards, things are not going to be normal. This requires what we call a democratic style of leadership, which is constantly re-energizing, re-familiarizing, pace-setting style of leadership, and that is what one really wants. Now, of course, as group norms, we will have to maintain the social distancing and all of that. But while doing all of that, a certain element of reassurance, confirmation, have been so unmindful, have been so unrealistic that they go around telling people, I will not give you increment, I will not give you this, I will not give you, your job is gone, I don't know, after 2 months, I don't even know whether your job exists. So this kind of things which may be required, and it may be required, organizations have to run in a real environment, but they still need to be conveyed and managed in a far more graceful way at the right point of time. Otherwise, your social responsibility as an organization and a mature leader is now going to be questioned if you do the things merely out of hurry, just to go to your boss and say, I have solved the problem, 50% आदमी लोग को हमने फेंक दिया. That is not the way. So the zone of sustainability has a very, very positive role, and you as an effective leader are supposed to maturely drive and provide people that element of pace setting and refamiliarizing as is expected of you. Once this zone of sustainability comes to a classical end, that is the time when the real work will begin. And that is called the zone of redesigning, the zone of recalibration. And most of you would have heard the terminology and the programs we drive called design thinking. This is the point of time that, keeping in mind the new situation, the new technology that is emerging, the elements of the new paradigm that you are experiencing, the new events that have happened and the impact, what do you have to do? Now the entire landscape has changed. The business landscape has changed. Therefore, how will your business remodel itself? What will it continue to do? What should it outsource in the value chain? How do you define the purpose in the new way? What is the new business model? What is the new purpose now? Because the old purpose has got shaken. So define the new purpose. What is the new mission? What are the new metrics? Because we can't continue to be measuring people and the corporate performances on the same sets of metrics. What is our go-to-market strategy? What is our sales strategy? How are we going to manage the supply chain in the new reality of the business model? What is the new organization structure? Are we going to continue to manage the organization on the same structure? Or does the new business model require a new organization structure? Are we going to redesign the roles? Are we going to redesign the goals and the measurements of the people? In or out, even from an organization structure point of view, you may require lesser number of people because you may want to invest at this point of time in technology. But what is important is grace. We as leaders who have all along been telling people that you are part of the Vasudeva Kutumba, suddenly cannot forget that Vasudeva Kutumba and just get into a mercenary way of managing people, because we have a social responsibility. We are leaders, we are people, we are Indians, we are far more emotional, we are far more sentimental than maybe the capitalists or the Americans. We want to do so. Please, please, please do not imitate. Maybe from a business model you want to imitate, but please, when it comes to handling people, do not imitate the hard and dry style of managing people very roughly, because that in the long run is going to cause the country and you a very high package and a cost. Not only from the psychological and mental head, but if you are doing things to cut people without understanding it in a scientific way, you may have to re-employ the same people at 3 times a higher cost if you are unmindful at this point of time. Because at some point of time, we are going to start the journey and start growing again. At that point, to rehire these people may become very costly if you are not very mindful. The style that a leader is supposed to adopt at this point of time is a very affiliative style of you can be firm. There is no harm in being firm. No one is saying firmness is not required, but the style that you need to adopt is a very affiliative and a coaching style, because the organization is redefining its new destinations and is talking about how it wants to recalibrate and move to the new horizons it wants. And the last stage after this is done is the stage of commitment, rededication, and reconstruction. So you have to build the strategic connections at this point of time. Once you have defined the new visions, so you have to reconnect the people to the new goals, the new vision, the new mission. You have to build the new engagement around the new motivations, because paradigm has shifted. As I told you, when paradigm shift, everything of the old paradigm becomes zero. You have to keep pulling out all the things that you were doing in the old paradigm and test them out for their applicability in the new paradigm. This is the new paradigm. When it continues to work, you can carry it forward. There is no need for you to throw the baby with the bathwater. What works in the new paradigm as well, you bring those things into the new paradigm. But what does not, you cannot carry the dead wood into the new war. You cannot carry old retired soldiers to fight in the new battle. And that is what you do. You build the new capabilities, you indulge in learning and development, building people's new capabilities, building their effectiveness and efficacy, and developing a very affiliative style of leader. Here is the time when the role of quiet leadership becomes very important. And which is why we said the turbulent times require very astute and quiet. Of course, you understood the meaning of matured. I don't have to explain to the wise Indian people what is maturity. We Indians are born mature. We are more mature than what we should do, because at some points of time, we stop having fun in our course for maturity. But maturity having been understood, we need to understand what is affiliative leadership, what is astute leadership, and what is quiet leadership. Because quiet leadership is not about Mr. Manmohan Singh kind of, Dr. Manmohan Singh kind of quiet leadership. It is totally different. If he understood his behavior to be part of quiet leadership, he's the wrong role model. And I'll explain to you why. There are 6 defined stages that organizations need to follow when they follow what is called the model of quiet leadership. But first, let me explain to you what is affiliative leadership. Affiliative leadership predominantly promotes harmony amongst the followers. Now that the new situation has happened, people are working towards the new mission and the vision. Now is the time to have affiliative leadership, which means promote harmony amongst followers, solve and manage the conflicts that people are going to face. You have to provide the leader at this point of time is going to actually glue the team together and bring it together. And that is the role of affiliative leadership. Quiet leadership, I'll talk later on, because actually I'll have to explain. There are 6 distinct steps, and it is a model of leadership which organizations need to have. The first step is called the think about thinking. Second step is about listening to the voice of potential, because in a new situation, potential is what is going to have, so creativity and potential becomes important. Speaking and communication with an intent to create effective inspiration is the next step. Dancing towards the insights, because generally if you work with the old insights, new situations will not work. And therefore, that is what is very, very important. Create a new thinking, and there is a model called create model, and that model has to be created, and then the follow-up has to be done. So actually, these are some of the things I wanted to share with you. And astute leadership means he is able to provide leadership at each and every stage differently as is required at a point of time. But it is also matured that when it does not itself have every element of leadership available within, then they have ability to identify the people who are the right resources and provide the organization with a complete blended leadership which can do the whole job. This is overarchingly the thought that I wanted to share with you about what is happening in the situation outside. So we began, as I'm recapping it for you for 1 minute, we spoke about the Chinese, may you live in interesting times. Then we came to what is the role of leadership, and we said there are 6 roles of leadership. We said that in situations like this, leadership and the alignment of the 5 sacraments gets thoroughly disturbed. And then we said that in disturbing times like what we experience, adversity totally destroys the alignment, and that alignment can certainly be brought in by the 4 stages. We said that the first zone is the zone of twilight zone. The second is the sustainability zone. The third is the redesigning zone. And fourth is the zone of recommitment and reconstruction. And then we said, you need to have affiliative leadership, and we need to follow a model of quiet leadership to make the transformational journey to the new destination successful. So Rishi, this is overarchingly what I wanted to share. If there are questions from you or from the audience, I'll certainly like to take them on.
Sure, it was a very learning insights shared by you, Dr. Malia. So now I'll
Pleasure.
proceed with asking the questions, and at the same time, I'll request all the participants in the Zoom to put their queries or questions in the Q&A section, and everyone following us in the social media, Instagram, Facebook Live, and the YouTube also to send their questions. We will try to categorize it under groups, and then we'll try to put it before the speaker. Dr. Malia, while a thought is coming to my mind, the most important thing in today's time, or the situation in the disruptive times, in other words, how should companies manage cost on the one hand and the employee moral on the other hand?
Very interesting question, Rishi. It is very important. Number one is that cost is a very important thing, because if the organizations don't manage cost, if they cannot manage the ship, then they cannot manage any passenger or the crew on the ship. All right. So on the one hand, there are these dichotomous situations that on the other hand, the company has to sustain itself. And on the other end, there is a certain element of employee advocacy which has to be managed. Now, imagine yourself to be a surgeon. There is a certain part of your body which has become very toxic. Now, the surgeon has to remove that toxic part. So he opens. So he has to determine with the scalpel of a surgeon and not the knife of a butcher as to how much to remove, which part has to be removed without cutting the muscles and without cutting the bone. Because in the process of trying to remove the toxic part, if you end up cutting the muscles and God forbid an immature doctor ends up cutting the bone, the loss that will be caused is much more than possibly letting the toxicity remain in the body.
Very well answered. If in a very layman's language, I have to give some reference or an example to what you have just tried to said. It's something like role should be that of a parents. If parents are having 2 children in the house and there are very limited resource, parents are not going to say to one child, you go and starve, I will look after only one. A very fine level of delicate balance has to be maintained, in other words.
And Rishi, my experience in several companies wherever we have managed this kind of adversities is that if the organization is fair, if the organization communicates, if the organization puts its problems before its people, I don't think, of course, people will not like it and things like that. But of course, people will understand the constraints on the company and they will be able to take it much more positively, provided you are graceful, fair, and objective. The problem I see in companies is that they don't want to be graceful, fair, and objective. And it is because of that that the confusion happens and then the labor disputes and all of that happen. So that is very important.
Very well said. Dr. Malia, the next question which is coming, major organizations across the globe are attuned to the urgent need to transfer their business and operating models in light of evolving customer behaviors, disruptive technologies, regulatory policies, and globalization. Yet many senior executives feel their organizations are not capable of driving the transformational changes necessary to create higher performing organization. Your views on it?
I certainly disagree. You know, there is this whole jingoism in the West that they know how to manage it. Indian corporations don't know how to manage. Whilst they seem to be very conveniently at the right time forget that most of the successful Western companies are managed by Indian managers. The CEO of some of the biggest companies in the world are Indian managers. And I can only promise you, based on my experience, that there is no shortage of leadership capability, knowledge, wisdom, ability to manage in India. Therefore, if anyone can manage, Indian managers are very, very capable. And luckily, we have a very supportive government, which is mindful of the business environment, which is positively doing things to support. Now, if we just want to be politically antagonistic about everything that one party is doing or one person is doing, well, I don't want to get into a political debate on it. But I certainly believe that the enabling environment for business and the capability that Indian managers and leaders have and the wisdom that Indian entrepreneurs have, I don't think that we lag anything which will help us to make these transformations. In fact, we will define the model for the world to follow.
Very well said. Very well said. One of the participants is asking, during the time of crisis situation, leadership usually get into firefighting mode only. The four stages to be implemented may not go in sequence, but usually are on parallel tracks. How do a business or a function head create a structured approach?
So there is, if you are not trained, and this is what I keep saying, that organizations which do not build adversity as a capability. So when you are in peacetime, the army that sweats in peace bleeds less in war. If during the peacetime you have built your capability on how will you manage the various adversities, particularly because, as I said, we are living in times of the black swan era. So more and more adversities will come. So organizations need to systematically develop their ability to cope with adversity. And if you do not do that, then the sheer shock and immediacy will make the leader exactly behave untrained like how the followers behave. And therefore, these steps have to go in sequence in a way. You know, when the child is born, it has to be a young child, then it goes into adolescence, then it becomes a youth, then it becomes a man, and then it becomes an old man, and then it becomes a corpse. But you cannot change the order.
Very well said. Dr. Malia, one very interesting question coming, which is a very hip and hop word in today's time, that is work from home. That's the new word everyone, three-letter word everyone wants to.
The next word which will become more famous than disco.
Sir, what is that? Can you describe it?
Work from home?
Yeah. So the question is, as part of the design thinking, what do you think will be the new metrics to measure individual performance as part of the work from home policy?
Right. So let's understand that we have gone through an unfortunate experience of work from home. Work from home ideally does not involve everybody getting locked into a house for a sustained period of time that we have experienced due to peculiarity of the situation. As a consequence of it, the domestic servants couldn't come. So you had pressures for that, plus pressures for children education from home. So we are not coming to a world in the changed environment where this is going to be the model which is going to be followed. Work from home is predominantly an event where organizations, number one, from a cost point of view, will be able to get in resource and support and help from a far larger workforce and people who are part of the gig economy to participate in its value creation processes without investing in hard-time real estate and hard-time resources. So they will be able to expand their reach. They will be able to do much more because their ability to stretch the resources is much wider, and they would be able to do that without wasting the resources on trying to buy, rent, or invest in meaningless real estate resources and such resources. So therefore, work from home is a reality of the future world, but we should not mistake work from home based on that limited experience, which unfortunately came due to certain health and other environments. Future is not necessarily COVID only. Work from home is not a response to COVID. It's much wider application.
The next question, one of the participants is asking, which leadership style to be established under the present circumstances? Democratic, autocratic, paternalistic?
So if you ask me, number one, as I told you, I am a propounder of astute and quiet leadership. Astute leadership, why? Because there are different requirements at different stages. When you are in the twilight zone, necessarily there is a certain aggressive leadership required because people are in the dark zone. They don't know what is happening. They will not want to listen even to the leader. And therefore, someone far more assertive will have to take over the situation and drive it. When it comes to the zone of sustainability, leadership style, which is much more, that is the style of leadership that will prevail. When you come into the zone of redesigning, there is a totally different style of leadership that is required. And therefore, at that point of time, you require affiliative leadership, you require firm leadership, you require a coaching style of leadership. That is very, very important. And when you then finally come into a zone of real transformation, that is the zone of commitment, rededication, and reconstruction, that is the point of time you require affiliative and you require quiet leadership. But astute leadership is being wise and mature to know which leadership style you are able to show at what point of time. So you cannot be defined by your style. An effective astute leader is one who knows how to modify his style depending on the challenge he is handling. So he cannot say that, Baba, I am only Muhammad Rafi, so I will sing only Muhammad Rafi songs for all occasions. He should be able to change the style depending on the requirement of the hour, depending on the requirement of the mood, depending on the requirement of the audience. So your ability to provide the right leadership at the right point of time, depending on the challenge and situation, is called astute leadership. It is not one leadership that defines me, which
The next question will be on a little different mood. I want to ask Dr. Malia. Maybe it may be a little personal, but I'll take that liberty to ask you, who is your favorite leader and why? It may be from a cricket field or anywhere. For example, if you throw me and ask me, Rishi, what is your favorite? I'll say Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw.
Okay.
It's not necessarily the corporate one.
So I will tell you based on my experiences. Of course, I've done a huge amount of leadership, so there are a lot many leaders I really admire. But I also had the experience when I was with Coca-Cola in the US for a short while to have on a couple of occasions. And of course, I heard a lot about him from people who were working under him, who were my bosses. And a couple of occasions I got to meet him. I think I admire Warren Buffett. And I believe he has the right leadership style. He has the market savvy. He knows when to be firm. He knows when to be graceful. He knows when to be socially responsible. And he knows that children have not to be given, and therefore succession is not to be just throwing away your money to the family, but succession is about knowing that sustained business has to continue on an ongoing basis, on a going concern basis, and children can be taken care of in a different way, but predominantly businesses and economies have to survive, and corporate social responsibility is a reality. I think I would consider him as one of the greatest leaders in the world.
Definitely, I think a lot of learning has to be there from your wisdom, sir. The next question, sir, I would like to put before you is on a little different level. As it is said that in India, mostly the way our corporate structure is, we have more and more the family-run businesses. And
Yes.
if I have to put this question before you, when lots of MSME people may be hearing to you, a lot of startup people may be hearing to you, we all know that Tatas and Reliance have grown, not because the promoters' wealth have shot, because they've invested in the company and they've believed in creating the value of their share, in other words. So companies' balance sheet has to be built more than the promoters' balance sheet, one.
Sure.
Second, at this background, how do the small players, maybe a chartered accountant firm or a practicing company secretary firm or a law firm or a startup, how do they deal with this legacy issue? If a person has started his firm and is reached a stage, how should he plan the future?
So number one is, of course, there is no standard cookie cutter answer, because for every individual, the answer is different. Everyone needs to be very clear about what is the purpose. The problem is that we should not believe that succession is a monster in the dark room. Succession is a reality. It is an event that is going to happen in your life, and it will happen not as comfortably as you believe if you don't plan for it. So succession has to be systematically planned at a given point of time. You may have multiple sons in the same business. You may have one son in another business and one son in your business, and you have to plan for both of them, and you may have only one business. or one son may just not be interested in that one particular business, or for all you know, both sons may be interested in business but not your line of business. So there are multiple complications that are emerging. So there cannot be one standard answer. The standard answer that I will really want to say is, please, please, please think of succession. Don't think that succession will happen by miracle. Don't think that one day you will die out of old age and your 2 sons or your 5 sons or 4 sons will maturely sit around the table and then amicably decide on how they will like to split your business. If it happens, maybe you are a lucky man, you did some good things in life. But generally our experiences of guiding businesses, particularly MSMEs, that they keep procrastinating the question of succession. And when you keep procrastinating of succession, the ultimate event really happens. And at that point of time, families fight, go into the courtroom, businesses collapse, and everything that you systematically and through hard work and labor built, sweat, toiled, ultimately gets destroyed. If your soul can see that situation from heavens, you will cry for a procrastinated decision you're taking. So I would seriously suggest, Rishi, anyone out here listening, they should plan their succession.
Very good, very good. I think again that tons of wisdom coming with all this thought can come with experience of dealing with such issues. The next question on our
Also
way,
knowledge, why are you undergrading knowledge?
sir, wisdom I said.
Wisdom is not knowledge.
One thing on a lighter note, I would like to say, कि once a person asked a gentleman, what do you mean by literacy? He said, according to him, a literate is a person who can read and understand the entire newspaper.
And he is not wise if he reads it.
Right. The next question coming our way, leadership usually only focuses on the growth and cash. Needs to focus on people. Without being people leader, growth and cash cannot happen. So basically they're trying to say how in today's time the organization should focus on the motivation of the employees.
So the question, see, it's like this, and I'll take a little 2 minutes more than what I would have allowed to answer this question. There is one concept called efficiency, and there is one concept called effectiveness. And people in the world of business are so confused that they don't know the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. And when I will explain this difference, you will then realize as to what the leader should be doing. Now, everyone has a given purpose they want to achieve in their business, and then they have resources. So when you try to achieve your resources, now resources are not unlimited. You don't have a cornucopia of cash or resources that you will keep throwing because that is required for business to succeed. So to the maximum available resources that you can get, whether they are technical resources, there are monetary resources, there are material resources, etc. The maximum that you can get out of the available resources is called efficiency. Now, that is what a good manager, efficient manager is supposed to do for you. Effective leader is supposed to use his inspiration to make the people resources of the organization with the same resources that were available perform much higher and do and stretch themselves to achieve many more higher things without adding any resources. And that is called inspirational leadership. Inspirational leadership is about an effective inspirational leader connecting with the people without adding resources, making them give their discretionary efforts, which they will give only if they are connected, engaged, and motivated. And that is the role of it. So efficiency, very good. You're running an efficient organization, you're getting value for resources. But effectiveness is what you should strive for. And effective leaders create that additional delta by getting the discretionary efforts of the people.
Next question I would love to ask you is, sir, how leaders should face criticism? Because it's not easy. And once criticism comes, many leaders may also lose rationality in their thinking process, or they may derail also from their path.
So you are giving an example of immature leadership. You are giving an example of what is called noisy leadership, which is why I said that for transformation to succeed anywhere in the world, organizations need quiet leadership. Quiet leadership has sufficient in the 6 steps that I was talking about, which I did not have time to go into the depth, and maybe someday we will talk about quiet leadership. Criticism is part of communication if it is positive. Now, when you do PhD, and those of you who may have ever tried doing a PhD, there is a process called diatribe. What is a diatribe? After you have developed your hypothesis and you have done your research, there are 6 professionally qualified people who will challenge you. Know what you are saying, your theory is wrong, but your theory is not absolutely delivering what you are saying. Like that, they will criticize your ability. Because you are so sure about what you are saying, your ability is a function of the way you are able to answer that criticism and critique, which is called a diatribe. Therefore, criticism is very critical to leadership and success, because it makes the leader sure that he has looked at all. If it becomes immature, if a leader becomes angry, if a leader starts shouting, he becomes vengeful, actually is an immature leader. And an immature leader can never successfully drive transformations.
Is old knowledge totally junk when the new world emerges?
Not at all. In fact, that is what I said, when paradigm shifts,
Right.
the old knowledge has to be tested out. Of course, remember this, you cannot fight wars of tomorrow with weapons of yesterday. You cannot go to tomorrow's war with an arsenal and a map of the enemy, which was of the Second World War. So you need those upgraded tools, upgraded knowledge, so that you have to be successful in fighting a war of the future. But old knowledge is not to be thrown away, because some of it may be continuing to apply even in the new paradigm. In fact, organizations, through a lot of stories, communicate this knowledge from one generation of its managers to the next generation of its managers. So stories is a very, very effective way in which culture and knowledge of the enterprise is transmitted from one generation of the managers to the newer generation of its managers for continuity.
Sir, many HR professionals are also participating in this webinars of ours.
Aren't they tired of hearing me?
No, they are not.
I'm surprised.
So the question which is coming is ki in today's time, you will agree, sir, it's very good to talk about leadership, but it is also about creating more leaders. And within the organization, how should the department or anyone view the concept of coaching and mentorship of the young managers in future leaders?
Very important. Meaning there is no debate, there is no answer. Any wise leader will tell you that preparing the young Turks is possible, and you can expedite the journey only through effective coaching, and which is what we do today. For example, Rishi, we are coaching 5 under 40 top class scions of big business families. We are coaching them personally to be able to ready them. Because they may come from Yale, and they can come from Harvard, and they can come from Wharton, but there is a certain shaping, polishing, explaining, hand-holding to make them deliver to the next level what they are supposed to deliver. And left by themselves without mentoring and coaching, neither they nor the younger lines of organizational leaders will be able to deliver on time. So once you see commitment of the people and the potential of the people on assessment, coaching is the most important route to success.
Sir, when we talk about leadership, how would you view the speed of adopting to change is of essence? The faster the enterprise grows, the easier it is to turn a business challenge into a new business opportunity. What's your view on it?
So Rishi, this is again a 50,000 feet paradigm, and the answer will not really hit everyone equally.
Right.
Growth means what? Taste means what? So these are all very, very specific questions. Of course, if an organization is able to grow faster, it will be able to solve its problems faster because your cash will come in. You can invest that cash into businesses. You can diversify. There will be cash available to be ensuring that there will be no cash flow shortages, because these are sometimes real problems which are coming. It is not the business model that is making some companies fail. It is the sheer shortage of the cash flow, and the business model and it grow. If the business gets more money and more cash, what's wrong? Let it get more cash. It's lovely, but cannot be through shortcut and wrong ways. Values are important.
Do you think it is a testing time for all leaders, and it is during this time that the country or a position of a particular leader in an organization will be decided based on the actions they take in the sustainable stage?
Of course, there is no question about it. You have said the most obvious, because leaders tend to believe, you see, please understand, they have till now been able to manage a sustained state of business, which was on a steady growth stage when the market environment was very, very normal. So they required a different kind of leadership style, knowledge of the market, knowledge of the value chain, existing relationships with the dealers, etc., in a steady state situation. Now the entire business model has changed. The entire go-to-market has changed. The entire capabilities have changed. The entire engagement and connections have changed. So now in the new context and situation, how is a leader able to shift from the old into the new gear is very, very important. Necessary for you to recall that Winston Churchill, even after winning the Second World War, did not become the leader and the Prime Minister of Britain, because people found him too good for war, but too bad for peacetime.
One of the participants is asking, leadership, power, and politics go hand in hand. How do leaders create a balance and not appear to be executing each of this and appear to be power hungry or being political?
You guys have decided to ask tough questions. Okay, so power in an organization is a reality. You cannot have an organization without power, because you're talking about resources, you're talking about resource allocation, you are talking about money being given to various departments, you're talking about budgets. So power is a natural governance requirement in any organization. No organization can be without power. And whenever there is power, there is a reasonable amount of politics which is bound to happen, because there will be contradicting demands. Different people will demand, different departments will demand, different projects will demand attention and resources and all, and you will go for one and you will not go for the other, or you will make compromises. But certainly there is a certain element of politics which is an outcome of power, which is a natural requirement in any organization from a governance point of view. What is bad? So neither is power bad nor is politics bad. What is bad is politicization, using politics negatively with an intention to accumulate power and control the organization to let it go to the end you want it to go and not the end that the organization should be going. Politicization is bad. Politics and power are necessities in an organization.
What are the tools corporates or leadership must adopt in crisis time to sharpen their knowledge and skill sets for the team?
Networking, listening, speaking less, listening more, continuously living on insights, understand what people want, don't double guess what they want, go and check out with them what they want. Requirements are different. Don't try to drive your old programs in new situations, they will not give you results. So you will have to re-look at the entire set of your role and what you deliver in a new environment, and that is very, very important. Don't take your job easy. Take it as if it's a new job born tomorrow and you're fulfilling a new job that you're taking
on. One of the participants wishes to ask,
Rishi,
yes,
Rishi, I would have made $1 million by now in advising if I would have answered all these queries for my clients. I'm joking. Go ahead.
Sir, we'll pay you in love and affection, sir.
Right, right, right. Which I cannot encash in the cash flow situation.
Right, sir.
Don't worry, I'm
Uh,
joking.
Sir, how do you handle disagreements with co-workers?
To bring about talking. So number one is, let's understand when there is any disagreement, or whenever I have faced any disagreement with my other leaders, first of all, I have gone into a state of quietness. I have started asking myself, why is the person or why are the people disagreeing with me? Thereafter, I said, why am I taking such a hard stance? Is it possible for me to climb down? So what is the range of alternatives which are available to me? Is it that only one alternative that I have offered, or have I looked at a range of alternatives which I can bring a reconciliation around? I talk to the people after that and say, okay, why are you disagreeing with me? What is the reason why you are getting hurt? What are the range of things that we can look at to get you to a pleasure point? And then sitting together, working, explaining my point of view, explaining the stance, showing no rigidity, I have succeeded in bringing about agreement generally. There will be some madmen, of course, who will just disagree for reasons of disagreement. You then have to take hardline stand. Remember one thing in organizations, whenever your health is not good, you go to a physician, you medicate yourself. But after a sustained period of medication, if things don't recover, surgery you have to do then to remove the toxicity. So therefore do surgery, but at the last stage. And surgery at the first stage is as counterproductive as no surgery at the last stage.
We are on now the last leg of the webinar, so I'll request all the participants to punch in their questions in the Q&A section. Sir, in the current time, when it is disruptive, or I have to use some example from a cricket analogy, we all know the great batsmen, any of the eras, when it becomes very difficult to bat, they try to innovate, they try to be creative. So in
Yes.
this leadership in the corporate side, how important is to be creative in the leadership? How, or in other words, how important it is for any leader to be creative? And can you give
Let,
some examples of it?
so let me tell you that when you are moving into a new zone, what is organization supposed to do? And I'm going to leave behind an anagram provided you promise not to laugh or not to think that this is my hubris. It is not about my hubris. But when organizations, those organizations will change if they follow these four rules, which I'm going to tell you. And that is ADIL. Unfortunately, it happens to be my name coincidentally, but that's not the purpose why I'm telling you. A is agility, D is drive, I is innovation, and L is learning. Speed with wisdom is agility. So organizations, whenever they are looking at a new paradigm, when old solutions don't find the way, they naturally have to look at new things, but they have to start looking at it with agility and wisdom. They have to have a passionate drive to continue to do. Now the third is I, which is innovation. Because all things are not going to work. You may keep trying it 100 times over, it is not. So unless and until your culture is flexible and your mind is not rigid, unless you innovate, you will not find solutions. So therefore, innovation is very important. And more important is creating a context and environment of learning. Learn to create a learning environment. Learn to learn, because knowledge will keep outdating itself. New knowledge will keep replacing itself and outdating the old knowledge. Even today, what you call Zoom will tomorrow be outdated. Whatever you learn tomorrow will soon be outdated. So there is no knowledge you can learn. What you can master is your desire for innovation and your ability to keep learning as a part of your culture and your individual development program.
Very well said, sir. Sir, when we have just discussed
Remember
creativity.
Adil, huh?
Yes, yes, yes. ADIL.
Correct.
After that, sir, the main thing coming to my mind, Adil, is ki, we have discussed creativity, the importance of it. We have just communicated through the four words, and that is Adil. So now, how important the next factor I'm going to ask you in the leadership trait is of the negotiation. How crucial it is for a leader to negotiate well, and what are the skill set or some tips you would like to give to the young future leaders or young Turks who are watching this program?
Rishi, by now you've taken away the core element from 7, 8, 9 leadership programs that I drive. Okay, so negotiation skills is one of the programs we drive for senior leadership. We don't do anything at the bottom of the pyramid. We only do, Firdosh and I run these programs with Robin only at the top levels. Now, when we are talking about negotiation, most of the people who are generally chartered accountants and others or business managers tend to think in terms of commercial negotiations. Negotiations is much wider. It is about negotiating your entire set of stance you take in life and how the stance you take could be negotiated over a period of time. It is very, very important to understand the domain of available alternatives which you have in a zone which can be negotiated. Price is not the only element that can be negotiated. Services can be negotiated. Relationships on a long term can be negotiated. Additional benefits can be negotiated. Packages can be negotiated. Shifting away from a stance on another matter can be negotiated. So negotiation is a much wider behavioral thing and not necessarily just some sets of 4 or 5 tricks to be able to negotiate better. Because if I teach you 5 tricks, understand someone else will teach your adversary also those 5 tricks. Now what will you do? So instead of that, I would say is go and approach negotiation through a positive program and build capability. Now, negotiation skills is a mindset issue, and this can systematically be influenced through capability building sessions on negotiation. I cannot give you tips because those tips, even your adversaries are listening to. Now, what will you do?
All right. So, in other words, for that, whoever wishes to have it, they should contact Dr. Adil Malia and do a little one-to-one session, and I'm very sure they would be benefiting out of it. Once I post the video of today's session in the YouTube, definitely I'll be putting the website link of Dr. Adil Malia over there as well. So MSMEs, the startup, and everyone may connect and try to learn or two from their wisdom. We are almost in the end of the session, and now I will not be taking any more questions, but I would like to share something. The leadership and the management is a subject, according to my personal limited knowledge of the subject, is such that people don't focus. They generally assume that leadership and the management by just some fancy degree or a fancy designation can be achieved. But after hearing Dr. Adil Malia, one thing is for very sure, it's not only a science. Leadership is not only a science, but at the same time, it is an art. So Dr. Malia, would you like to emphasize on this or just stretch it a little further, the leadership, science and the art and the balance between the two?
Sure. So knowledge is what you pick up in books. Knowledge is what you pick up in universities. When people graduate out of knowledge, this whole thing is your degree is only a signal to the labor market. It only tells the labor market that you have got this degree and therefore you are available for a certain. What is important is that when a man goes around performing, there are so many esoteric issues which bother a man and not knowledge that determines his success. There is a certain element. So actually, let me answer the question a little differently. A successful professional has 5 quotients to him. The first is intelligence quotient. That intelligence quotient he picks up by getting information, education, knowledge from whichever university or books he reads. Information and intelligence is equal to information quotient, IQ. The second he requires for his success is emotional quotient. Because we are all living in a world of people, and therefore, if we understand the way we work and the way people work, and if we can bring it together such that as we generate value, we also generate happiness, then that kind of a leader has a greater credibility and success than only the one who has more information, knowledge, and a gold medal from his university together. The third is spiritual quotient. When we say spiritual quotient, it is not about Ram Janma Bhoomi type of spirituality. When we are talking about spirituality, we are talking about the value systems. We are talking about your value systems which you adhere to and the organizational value systems. The two of them need to be congruent. Otherwise, most successful people with high knowledge ultimately end up losing their job and they indulge in behaviors of value which are denigrating. They do fraud, they fudge vouchers, and the most intelligent and bright people, they deteriorate and lose their judgment and career. So adversity quotient, emotional quotient, spirituality quotient. The fourth is adversity quotient. Because at given points of time, we are living in a world, what do I do with a leader who has all information and knowledge, but when adversity hits, he collapses? Who is going to provide leadership to my ship when it is sinking, when the captain is now collapsing? Which second lieutenant, which commander will take over? So therefore, unless and until the captain has adversity quotient, he will not be able to succeed. So that is the fourth important quotient. And the fifth in the changing environment, in an era of black swan events, is his transformation quotient. How, after adversity, is able to lift the organization systematically through the 4 stages and deliver it to the new stage and the new horizon and the new purpose and the new vision and the new mission of the enterprise. So therefore, intelligence, good to have, signal to the labor market, but there are many more things you need to develop.
We have some time left for today's webinar, so it's only 2 questions now. That will be completely ex-tempo question. I'm going to ask you, not anything what I have prepared notes or something like that. And I feel it is very important for the viewers if I ask those 2 questions, especially the young Turks. Again, I will be, because I firmly believe every one of us, irrespective of the profession we are, we should have some concept from the military where we have a buddy concept. Each senior should try to groom one junior within him. So for the young Turks, sir, if any one good book on leadership you would like to recommend them to read?
Well, if you see all these books which are out here,
right?
I'm not going to recommend one book. I'm going to recommend reading.
Right.
I'm not going to fish and give them one fish. I'm going to tell them, learn the art of fishing. You see all these books. I continue to be a student even today. I continue to get up at 4 o'clock every day without fail, come into my library and read my books without fail. Because each time I read even some of the old books, there are newer and newer dimensions of meaning I'm able to extract out of it. So therefore, what is important is learn to be a student all your life. If you believe you're given a signal, you, Mr. Young Turk, will no longer remain young, and Turkey is any which is not a great country in the world to recall now. So you will neither remain young nor want to be a Turk. What is important in the changing environment, learn to be a learner. Learn to be young at heart. So instead of a young Turk, replace it by a young learner, and that is what you should target yourself to be.
The last question coming your way, sir. Some anecdote what you would like to share from your illustrious career, maybe little on a funny side, but lot of learning can be learned from that anecdote.
Really, I find it difficult to identify this anecdote, but I can only tell you my one little experience. It is not funny. It is a good experience that I should talk. So when I had gone to US with GE and I was working, I had a coach, and luckily I am an output or a product of a good coaching system. My coach was a gentleman called Mr. Bob Amar. Bob was a Frenchman living in America. Amar was because his father was at some point of time part of the Rajneesh movement and had adopted the name Amar, which of course in America he anglicized as Amar, but actually it was Bob Amar. And of course, he was not part of the journey. His father was, but he had taken that name. When I went out there to America and I was studying, I was a young guy, possibly 24, 25, bubbling with enthusiasm. There was GE. I had got this opportunity with GE to go out there. And he was appointed as my buddy. Because you said buddy, so I thought of him. He was appointed as my buddy. And he insisted that I should stay in his house. Now, the beautiful part of it is he said that, look, I cannot only train you to be a good leader unless and until I'm able to influence many other elements of your life. Because a leader does not, first of all, he said a leader has to learn to be a good person. Unless you are a good person, you will not be a good father, you will not be a good son, you will not be a good brother, you will not be a good husband, and therefore you will never be a good leader. So therefore, first you have to learn to be a good person. And to be a good person, let us start doing. So every day in the morning, I would go for a long walk with him and his wife. And his wife was a yoga practitioner, an American lady, who taught me yoga. I, who came from India, the land of yoga, actually learned yoga from an American lady, and many lessons about our scriptures from an American couple. The message that I want to give you is our literature, our Indian culture, our books, our mythology has so many wonderful stories, has so much to learn from, has so much to take back home. We mindlessly keep taking from 150 years of the last structured management literature to find solutions. Versus if we were to go back, have the wisdom to understand our culture, our mythologies, our stories, our arts, our yoga, our meditations, which they are doing and we are not, we would certainly be far happier than what we are today. This is one of the messages, not a very happy or a comical episode, but an episode I thought I would share with you because I think it's necessary.
Definitely. Dr. Malia, it was an extreme pleasure.
But Rishi, I wanted to give one quotation. If you're closing, I want to give a quote. Should I do it now or should I do it later on?
No. Now you can say that.
So actually, lots of people say, oh, it's a big challenge. How do you think we can do it? इतना सब करना होगा, ये सब कौन leader कर पाएगा? हम नहीं कर पाएंगे. Do you tell us how to do? So to them, I will only say that, you have to start and take the steps. So there's a very beautiful quote which says, हासिल होंगे वो ऊंचे मकाम. हासिल होंगे वो ऊंचे मकाम. तू पहला कदम रख के तो देख. फिर जलेंगे वो बुझे चिराग. तू चिंगारी बन के तो देख.
Beautiful. It was an extreme pleasure for us, sir, to host you today for this webinar. And at the same time, I extend my hearty gratitude from the bottom and the core of my heart. And I don't have words to express, and I'll just say in the Indian style, namaste to you, thanking you. And I will request all the participants to bear with me and Adil, because I was going to say something to each other in our native language, because I want to, he's a Parsi and I am a Gujarati. So if you don't connect, it would be, સાહેબ લાખ આભાર તમારો, તમે આવ્વા અને અમને આશીર્વાદ આપ્યો.
Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Basically, also, he was very sweet on his part and very gracious on his part to agree in such a short time, to carve some time out of his busy schedule and agree to give his talk. I think even after spending good amount of money, it's not easy to get some heart-to-heart communication, which is very practical, and which is not only practical, but which is derived out of tons of experience of 4 decades, 40 years. It's not such a short time. At the same time, I'll request all the viewers and all the participants, from today's blockbuster show or the webinar, what we have just conducted from one of the industry veteran, next Sunday, we are going to host R. Gopala Krishnan, another industry veteran, ex-vice chairman of Unilever, Tata Sons director. The theme of the topic of the webinar is going to be reset ideas for the business leaders. At the same time, that is going to be the coming Sunday. Prior to that, on Friday, From Ad World, we are going to have Bonnie Loy Fernandez. He's going to address on hack the influence people and product. Dr. Malia, at the same time, one of the participants also wants to extend. Many of them are sending me messages. I think in private, I'll try to forward all of them. Some may say it is a very wonderful seminar, awed by your habits. They are trying to say it's very important to have a reading habit. So I think I can go and go on. Lots of compliments are coming from Instagram, Facebook, Zoom, and everywhere. I'll try to collect and send it across to you.
I'm honored and I'm humbled.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Much obliged, sir.
Connect. Thank you, sir.